All right, hey everyone, Ranger William and Ranger Roland out here for the 240th anniversary of the Battle of Cowpens. We are here at Cowpens National Battlefield, 240 years to the hour of the battle. If you can see behind me, this nice gravel road with the sun coming up. This is the Green River Road here on the eastern end of the battlefield, and we're going to start making our way closer towards the core battlefield, talking about the action, talking about kind of what led up to it a little bit, but mostly focusing on the battle itself, this being kind of a real-time video, a real-time walkthrough. So for the Americans first, when Daniel Morgan is making his way up this road, if y'all have seen our other videos we've been posting as part of the 240th virtual anniversary event, Daniel Morgan's army, they're on the run. They're looking for a place to turn and make a stand. They know Tarleton is pursuing them, and they know he's getting very close. Now, about 5.5 miles further up this road to the west-northwest is going to be the Broad River. And just like we're used to here in this part of South Carolina in the winter, we've been seeing some rains, a little bit of snow now and then, and those rains are starting to flood the river. So Morgan knows crossing it isn't really going to be an option, at least not quickly. But then he's also informed that the local militia are probably going to abandon his army if he crosses the river and leaves North Carolina. So he needs to find a place here in South Carolina to turn about and make a stand. So Ranger Roland, what is Tarleton doing bringing us up to this point?
Once Tarleton gets on Morgan's trail, so he's been chasing Daniel Morgan for about 12 days, crossing over the Saluda River, Packlet Rivers. The morning of January 16th, when Morgan leaves Burrs Mill to march up this way to the Cowpens, as Ranger Will said, so Menagerie Tarleton moves in to Burrs Mill late afternoon. The morning of the 17th, Tarleton learns about 1:30 in the morning that Morgan is here preparing for battle. So he wakes up his men about 2 o'clock in the morning. It's a 12-mile march, and he marches them down on the Green River Road the same way that Morgan came into the field. He sees the skirmish line up there. He sets his men up for a bayonet charge down the field.
Very good. So here behind me, we're getting to the edge of the wood line. This is where Morgan's going to arrive the afternoon of January 16th with his local militia guide, Dennis Trammell. And Dennis Trammell is going to give Morgan a tour of this cowpen, Saunders Cowpen, that you see here behind me, described as open wood, part pasture, with little to no growth in front. So it's hemmed in on the sides by thick, dense woods, like you can see behind me. The greenery here over my shoulder is our restoring a native canebrake. So canebrake, springs, creeks in several places. This is going to confine that open pasture area with these nice, gentle rolling hills. This is where Morgan turns to Dennis Trammell and says, "This field will hold victory or Morgan's bones." This is where he's going to set up his line. So going back to Roland here, when Tarleton arrives here at the field, what are we doing next?
A little bit kind of going back to when Tarleton leaves Burrs Mill. Once Tarleton learns that Morgan is here at Saunders Cowpens, he asks some of his local scouts like Alexander Chesney, what is this area like? Chesney tells him it's open, flat, open wood, ideal for mounted operations. So in Tarleton's mind, this is the perfect place to put an army. It's made for him and his fast, mobile troops. Once Tarleton gets on the field, the first thing he does is Tarleton sends about 50 mounted riders up the road here towards that ridge. That's where Morgan puts his skirmish line. Those men don't run away as like a militia normally do. They actually open fire and they empty about 12 to 15 of the saddles. The rest of Tarleton's riders come riding back here and they tell Tarleton, we cannot scout ahead until that line is cleared. So the infantry is told to deploy, starting left, 17th Light Dragoons, your light companies, of the British Legion, the 71st of the 16th Light of the Prince of Wales American, so British Legion Infantry, 7th Regiment of Foot over here on the right. They are also flanked by about 50, so British Legion Horsemen, 71st Highlanders in reserve, and the British Legion Cavalry straight back this way, kind of like you are looking back down the Green River Road. Tarleton's also got 2 cannons, 2 3-pound grasshoppers or field pieces. One of them is put with the British Legion Infantry, so other one is put with the 7th Regiment of Foot over here towards the River King. Tarleton's men are told to drop the packs, fix bayonets, and deploy forward. So we're going to start walking down the field as the British line is engaging this skirmish line up here.
Let's hit it. Now, one thing about the battlefield here, as you're seeing, we're progressing down the Green River Road. We're coming from the British deployment point, moving towards the ridge line. You can see there more on the left side of the road. This ridge would have run more across the entire field, but in the 19th and 20th century, with this road being still used in construction, it's smoothed out, it's leveled out. So we've lost some of that ridge height over the centuries. So if you can imagine, you can notice the more prominent ridge here in the field to the left side of the road. This ridge would have been running this altitude change all the way across the field. So talking about what are the Americans doing, we'll see if I can use my ranger skills and walk backwards and talk at the same time. So up here on this ridgeline, you've got about 175 of Daniel Morgan's skirmishers. These riflemen are going to be North Carolinians, Georgians, a few South Carolinians, Majors McDowell, Major Cunningham, Captain Hammond, and they're going to be scattered all across this ridgeline. So as the British infantry, portrayed so elegantly by Ranger Roland here. There we go. As they're coming forward here, they are getting this massively effective rifle fire, this sniping fire from these skirmishers who are maintaining contact with the British line as they're falling back. These are the men that Daniel Morgan says to target the epaulet men. These riflemen are aiming for the British officers, now starting to be ever so nicely silhouetted by the rising sun coming over the treetops there to the east. But as these British bayonets get closer, these riflemen are falling back. So right now we're looking at where McDowell's North Carolinians would have been, and these guys are working their way along the edge of the wood. They're going to cross over this ridge and join on the right flank of Morgan's second line, the area that's kind of anchored in by what some people refer to as Maple Swamp. The Georgians and a few South Carolinians here on this other side of the road, they're falling back to that thick wood line you can see behind this grassy ridge, and they're joining in on the left flank of the militia line, the headwaters of Suck Creek, a few springs over there where the creek starts to form and can still be seen today.
Now, if you are part of Tarleton's British infantry, when you see a militia running back, as Ranger Will described, to the British, that's what a militia does when they are presented with a bayonet. So to the British marching up this way, they are already winning the battle at the onset because they're chasing a militia off the field as they normally do. They don't realize that they are running into a trap. To them, it's just another battle, the same thing as we've always come across a militia run. So when presented with a bayonet, so let's keep on going down to the next one.
As we top over this ridge line here, you can really start to see better the rest of the field. Now, a little word about the riflemen here with Morgan's army. They do have American long rifles, Pennsylvania rifles. This is going to be later called the Kentucky rifle. The whole idea here is that you have those spiraling grooves inside the barrel, a tight-fitting round lead ball. Your accuracy with this weapon described in period sources as being easily 200 yards. So, I don't know if I can zoom. I can. you can barely see a bench, a light brown bench, and a light gray sign. This is going to be the marker for the second line of Daniel Morgan's army. I'm going to zoom back out. And that point to where Ranger Roland and I are now standing, this is just about 200 yards. So this range from where we are to that little bench down there, these two lines, they're within rifle range of each other. Now we say that it's 200 yards because there was a British officer named George Hanger. He wrote greatly about the war afterwards. He said that he would interview captured American riflemen. Hanger was the second in command of the British Legion. He's not here at the Battle of Cowpens. He's ill at Camden. But he says in these interviews that he would ask them, what was their range? What could they do with a rifle? And he asked them if they could hit a man at 200 yards. And I love how he recorded this. He says the captured rifleman says that he is most likely going to be able to split the man's wig at 200 yards. So you're looking at a very accurate, very aimed fire from these riflemen. Now these McDowell's guys too, this whole side of the field that's now falling back to the American right flank, these are Kings Mountain veterans. This is Joseph McDowell Jr. These guys have been here to this same piece of ground just 3 months before joining up with the march to Kings Mountain. The same is true for a lot of the South Carolina militia. So these riflemen, these local guys, not only do they know their business and know their weapons, they know this field. They've been here at least once before. Now, Ranger Roland talking about the British and the militia, when they see the militia. You said they top over the ridge here. The go-to tactic was the bayonet charge.
Yes. To continue with a bayonet charge. To the British, so militia are most effective at long ranges. Once you get close in quarters, so militia are not able to deal with bayonets because they typically do not have a bayonet weapon. But they could have a close quarters weapon, a hatchet, a knife. But when you have a British infantryman holding a 5-foot-long brown bess musket, and then you put a 1.5 long bayonet on the end of it, that gives a British infantryman a reach of 6.5 feet. Couple that with like a militiaman who could have a hunting knife, who can maybe reach out at like arm's length. So for close quarters combat, a brown vest and a musket will always win in that time. So Tarleton's forces are the British infantry, and when you see a militia, do not waste a musket ball on them. Just charge in as quickly as possible, and you want to close the distance from the sharpshooter line to the second line of militia down here under Colonel Andrew Pickens. You want to close all of this distance as quickly as possible. So militia, a good militiaman even, is going to take them approximately a minute to reload and shoot. From this point, 100 yards to the next line, a British infantryman can easily bayonet charge this in 20 to 30 seconds. So militiamen are not going to be reloaded. They do not have a weapon capable to take on a bayonet charge, so they typically run in battle. This is exactly what the British are expecting, and it's exactly what they see. So they're not going to bother wasting musket balls on militia, just bayonet charge down the field. To the British, this is a battle they are constantly winning all the way through.
Now, as the British line is coming forward, Daniel Morgan is doing what he can with these militia down here to encourage that belief that the British are winning. He's going to try and keep the British moving. There's one account that talks about as the British line tops over the ridge where we are now, pushing forward to the militia line, Daniel Morgan rides up, and the officers have been calling out to the men to hold fire, hold fire. They want to draw the British in, but Morgan wants to make the British think that they're trying to engage. So he calls for men to step forward and bring on the fight. This is where you get from Colonel Brandon's regiment here by the tree line. A man by the name of John Savage is supposedly the first one to fire from this formation. He's going to be described as stepping forward a few paces, taking a knee, aiming his rifle, firing and killing a British officer, taking him off of a white horse. Now, so when this scattering of fire happens, maybe 10 or 11 of these extra riflemen from each of the 4 militia regiments, this really encourages the British to think, hey, these guys are going to be disorganized. It's time to charge in. Now, we are now within range of that killing distance. Some of the eyewitness accounts say that the militia were ordered to hold fire until they could clearly see the British faces, or until they could see the whites of their eyes. From where we are now to, there it is, that sign and bench there along the side of the road, this is where you start to see these massive militia volleys tear into the British line. You're looking at men from Brandon's regiment, Hayes' regiment, Roebuck's, Thomas's. They just blast these aimed volleys of rifle fire, causing great casualties in the British line. One British lieutenant over here on the British right wing, over my shoulder, he says by the time they got past the militia line, his company has lost 2/3 of their officers and the same proportion of men. So these aimed rifle volleys are taking a great toll. Now, the militia here have been encouraged by Daniel Morgan. They've been told to fire 2 shots from this position and then fall back. But like Ranger Roland was talking about, that long reload time for these American militiamen with their rifles, a lot of these guys don't have time to reload and fire that second shot. Only Brandon's men over here by the tree line, where John Savage fired the first, these men are able to fire a second volley before they fall back. The rest of the men, they realize the British bayonets are too close and they keep pushing backwards. There we go.
Now, once the British have gotten up into the second line of militia here, where Pickens was, and so Pickens and militia run back, run like back of the Continentals as Morgan has told them. Tarleton is back here. He is trying to get his British dressed back into disciplined lines, because a lot of Tarleton's field officers, majors and captains, so lieutenants, are no longer here. Tarleton is having a very hard time getting his British army back into disciplined tight ranks. They called it dressing of the lines. You are also now engaging some Morgan's lines of Continentals up here, of the regulars. This line of Continentals is why Tarleton's men are here, is to engage and kill this line of men back here. So you start trading fire back and forth. Tarleton would describe the action between the British regulars and the Continental lines as the lines were well in fire, the action is hot, they produce much slaughter. So you start getting muskets on the British side and the Continentals are banging back and forth. Tarleton also realizes that his infantry that's up here, or what's left of the 7th and the British Legion and the 16th Light and the Prince of Wales American, has fought the Continentals to a stalemate, but they're not able to throw them off the field on their own. So Tarleton tells of the 71st Highlanders, who were put in reserve in back of the 7th on the right side of the field, to march down on the wide flank on the right side of the field over here, so by that tree line. And once you get down to the Washington Light Infantry Monument down the field here, to wheel right. So the Continental line is being hit on the front and the flank. They're being hit at like 2 sides on a right angle. If you can also vision down here at the Continental line, as the Highlanders are moving down the field, their drums are banging, their bagpipes are going off. The 71st Highlanders, in a very loud charge, are saying, so huzzah, as they're charging down the field. Down here too, you got musket fire back and forth. Smoke is kind of hanging around the area. Officers are barking commands. Drums are going off. Injured men are screaming, are moaning. Sheets of fire are going back and forth. This right here is a perfect universe of battle.
But Ranger Roland, where are the militia?
The militia are actually regrouped back over to the right side over there. So in a small clearing, approximately where Morgan had his campsite, according to Morgan's orders, are to regroup over there. Don't leave the field, because in case I need you, I can bring you back in, but just regroup over there. Don't run away.
Are they being pursued?
Yes, they are. On the left side of the line over here also, of the 17th Light Dragoons, as the militia is running back, are thundering down the field. So when the militia are running back over to Morgan's campsite over there, you can hear the hooves of the 17th are thundering down the field. Their horses are snorting out. The British officers are drawing their sabers and they're charging down the field. They do engage with some militia. There are talks about head and shoulder wounds. So above the militia, at this point here, the militia no longer have a reason to stay. So they want to run back there, grab their horses, and get out of here.
They gone. Now we're going to share one really cool story too. Talking about these militia being back here trying to reform. We have one account by a young militiaman. I think he's 15 or 16 at the time of this battle, named James Collins. He actually wrote an autobiography of his service after the war. He says when he was back with these militia trying to rally and regroup, and he saw these British Dragoons coming in, he thought, my hide is in the loft. He says, that's it. We're done for. No way we're getting out of this. It's either him or another participant describes them as being hit by 200-300 cavalry. It's just 50 coming down this line here. But when you are already amped up, you got the adrenaline going, there's some confusion and some chaos going on, and here come 50 men on big horses, 25, 30 miles per hour at a full gallop, just charging into you, you panic. Now, when that happens, the American commanders are not just going to let this happen. They're not oblivious to these British horsemen. I'm going to swing around, make everybody dizzy, trying to watch my screen. Where are we? This wood line right back here, it goes up to a slight ridge, and there's a wood line, and then it drops. There's actually a pretty good gully in that wood line, described by the period accounts as a ravine on the right-hand side of the field. In that ravine is about 170 American cavalry hidden back there in that drop, in that tree line. But if you can, if you want to picture right there at the crest of the ridge, nice and visible, one or two white jacketed horsemen, the 3rd Continental Light Dragoons, William Washington, the lieutenant colonel of this unit, commander of all of this cavalry. He's watching this whole situation happen. So when you end up with the British cavalry in that next field right there, the next kind of lighter spot through the trees, those 17th Dragoons are hitting those militia, starting to scatter them. William Washington gives the order, and you end up with about 70 of his 3rd Continental Dragoons charging out of that gully, out of that wood line, straight across the field into the flank, the side and the rear of the 17th Light Dragoons. So you have about 70 American horsemen going into about 80 American horsemen going in and hitting about 50 British Dragoons who weren't expecting this charge. This is going to scatter them. James Collins, who talked about thinking he's done for, he describes being saved by these American Dragoons and says that they pursued the 17th, they pursued the British Dragoons back down the field. He says they were like a herd of wild Choctaw steers being driven to a Pennsylvania market. So amazingly descriptive language, this guy who knows the cattle industry here at the Cowpens. But he's watching these British horsemen run for their lives, and the American Dragoons actually get all the way back behind the British army pursuing these British horsemen, and they find the artillery horses of those those 2 cannon that Roland talked about, those 2 3-pounders. They call upon those horsemen, their drivers, to surrender. They refuse, and William Washington is going to execute the horses of the Royal Artillery back there behind the British Army. This is going to come into play later at the end of the fight. Now, as Ranger Roland was talking about, with the Highlanders coming around, if I get my right angles here. I lost myself. There you are. Okay. So coming from the tree line here, we're standing on the ground where those Continentals would have been. So I'm going to turn the camera back around so you get a better perspective. We're at the Continental line, looking forward down the field towards where the British Army is coming, and then out of nowhere, 200 Highlanders swinging around the right flank. So like Ranger Roland was talking about, we have now been flanked. We are about to have our line turned, and the order is given for that right-hand company, those men, the Virginians under Major Triplett, to refuse the flank. So just like Ranger Roland talked about, this is now a kind of a 90-degree attack. We need a 90-degree defense. So rather than trying to turn the line, however, there is confusion, there is noise, the chaos, the fog of war that Ranger Roland mentioned, the yelling, the screaming, the smoke, the gunfire, the bagpipes, and that company does not understand the order. So rather than turn and face the new threat, they turn all the way around and they begin to leave. So as you're here on the Continental line, facing enemy to the front, enemy to the side, and now your buddies are leaving, each company down the Continental line here, the Virginians, the Marylanders, the Delaware troops, the other Virginians under Major Triplett on the left, they think a retreat has been ordered, so they start making their way down the field. Now, Ranger Roland, if you were a Highlander, a British soldier, and now we've got this going on, what are they going to do here?
You've already been through 2 lines of militia running, which is what you expect on the field. Keep in mind, too, that a lot of the Continentals down here are the Maryland and Delaware guys. They were chased off the field at the Battle of Camden about 6 months earlier, August of 1780. So, to the British, this right here is turning into the Camden. The Continentals have got to be on the run again, which is what we typically expect. Since there's not a lot of Lieutenant Colonels Tarleton's field leadership left, majors, captains, lieutenants, the common, British rank and file infantrymen. Once you see this whole line of Continentals coming back here, we got them on the run. The battle's over. So the British just break and charge in. And we might as well just go ahead and just end this battle. So bayonet charge them, charge them. So down the field, the Continentals are defeated, and we won this battle again. Tarleton also gave orders to the 71st Highlanders that when they are moving down the field to give no quarter to the Americans. So the Highlanders are like expecting to just come in and just charge everybody so they come across. Now we're going to turn it back over to Ranger Will for the climax of the Battle of Cowpens.
So we're walking with the Continentals right now. I like how you have Ranger Roland behind me, so you can imagine I'm a Continental marching back, and he's just running after me. Talking about the lack of leadership and discipline in the British line. William Washington, who has just saved the militia, he's just chased away those British cavalry, he has rallied his troopers, and he's come back around behind the American line towards where we're heading. And he sees what's happening. He sees this confusion. This is one of the great parts about Daniel Morgan and his leadership and his tactics out here. None of this was planned to happen. This is absolutely not according to plan. But he has leadership who has control of their own individual elements, control of their men, their little part of the battle, and they're thinking on their feet. So when Daniel Morgan sees the Continentals falling back, he charges up to their commander, Colonel John Howard. He asks what's happening. Are you beaten? And he's simply told that no. He's like, we're not falling back. One account has him saying, have you ever seen men retreat in such good order? They're just marching in the wrong direction, but they're reloading as they head back. Like Ranger Roland was talking about, the British here, they're veterans of Camden. They're veterans of other battles. They've seen these men run before. They assume they know what's going on. These Continentals are also veterans of those battles. Camden, where Continentals fought a fighting retreat. They covered the retreat of some of the American troops. A few of these guys may have even been at Long Island, where they fought and covered the retreat of the American army there. So this whole fire and fall back thing, nothing new to them. Morgan says he's going to pick a new spot where they're to turn about and stand. Now, about that time, you have this courier from William Washington come charging over to Colonel Howard, and he says that if Howard can get the Continentals to turn and give them a few fires, or a few good fires, depending on the account, Washington will bring his troopers around, and they'll have them. He'll bring them around in a charge. So where we're at now, this small little rise, this little hilltop here behind me, this is that ground that Morgan chose for those Continentals. As they're falling back, they reach this spot, they turn about, and the British line is right here behind them. They turn around. A few accounts say that they just turn and fire. There's one account that describes it. Sounds kind of like they're firing just from the hip. They're not even aiming their muskets, but they turn about, they blast into the British line. Now, when these guys are firing, most of your Continentals here are going to have the 69 caliber Charleville musket. Their flanks, the Virginians on the left and right flank. You have some rifle companies in there, maybe some old British muskets. But your standard issue cartridge, your ammunition for these Continentals is going to be a large, about 62 caliber round ball, and then 3 or 4 pieces of 20 to 30 caliber buckshot called buck and ball. So when one of these men fires, it's actually 4 or 5 projectiles going out towards the enemy. So you can imagine if you have a whole line, hundreds of these men blasting that kind of ammunition at a very close range, some accounts say 10, 12, 15 yards, right into the British line, it causes massive destruction. William Washington says that it was a most murderous fire. Colonel Howard says a few fires and they had the Highlanders stopped. Well, no kidding, you're firing right into them with this stuff. But you have British chaos and casualties all along the field here. So Ranger Roland, massive casualties in the British line. These American troops are not retreating. They're now counterattacking. What are you going to do next?
One of the major orders that John Eager Howard gives after that murderous fire that will really turn the Revolutionary War on its head is the Continentals here are told to charge bayonets. So the Continental Army charges ahead to offensive bayonet charge. The British down here, what's left of the 7th and the British Legion Infantry, of the 16th Light, Prince of Wales American, they basically throw down their muskets. They've had enough. The only British unit left that is still attempting to fight is the 71st. So Highlanders over here on the left flank.
Let's swing
now,
around.
The Continental Army also counterattacks, and the Continentals are charging ahead. That militia that regrouped back here is brought back into the battle, and they split and they charge around on both sides. The mounted forces under William Washington, or the 3rd Continental Light Dragoons, actually charging back of what's left of the British forces over here on my right. The South Carolina mounted militiamen charge over here on my left, and they get in back of the Highlanders. So the British forces down here find themselves ensnared in a double envelopment. In the annals of military history, this maneuver has only happened at a few times in combat. It's where you completely surround an army. Tarleton came to this field with 1,150 troops. Some people call Tarleton's force the flower of Cornwallis's Southern Army. They are some of the best troops out there. It is a lot of Cornwallis's light forces, light infantry as well, that will have paramount effects after this battle's over. The whole Battle of Cowpens here takes about 20 minutes and it's over and done. And what's left down here of that 1,150 is about 50 to 75 men here have managed to escape. down the field, you also have the 50 17th Light Dragoons. The 200 Legion Cavalry is all the way down the field. Tarleton has been still holding them in reserve. So once this Continental line is broken apart and they start to run, I can cut my Legion Cavalry loose to charge down the field and just cut them to pieces and just end this battle once and for all. Well, tables have now turned. Lieutenant Colonel Tarleton, who realizes the battle down here is done, charges back into that 200 Legion Cavalry. The British Legion is all loyalist colonists loyal to the crown, who want to fight for their king. So when Tarleton charges back and tells them to, by God, come forward, engage, you need to get into battle now. Some of the riflemen, as Ranger Will, who ran off to the side, come back out. And one of them actually dropped Tarleton's horse in front of the Legion Cavalry. They can also hear down here in this space in back of us how the Continentals are yelling. So Buford's play in Tarleton's quarter. This battle's over and done. But the Legion Cavalry wants no part of it. So they turn and they flee down the field. So Tarleton leaves the Battle of Cowpens with 250 out of 1150. He lost 88% of his command here, in about 20 minutes. 200 of that 250 does not engage in the battle. That also has dramatic effects as well. The final point of this battle is once all of this back here is basically done, and the two cannons are captured by Captain Anderson of Maryland and Captain Kirkwood of Delaware. Lieutenant Colonel William Washington can see down the field some greencoats of the British Legion, so he charges ahead. He runs in to Lieutenant Colonel Tarleton, so he draws his sword, because these two men have a very good history going back and forth of earlier battles. So during the siege of Charleston, Lieutenant Colonel Tarleton has destroyed 2 parts of Washington's mounted forces at the battles of Monk's Corner and Lanew's Ferry. So Washington and Tarleton already got bad blood to start with. So Washington charges ahead and he draws his saber. So when he says, "Where now is the boasting Tarleton?" And they get into this big saber duel that is a very famous picture that we have pins and patches of back at the visitor center. Some of Tarleton's troopers turn around and come charging back. A few of Washington's men also go charging down on the field as well to assist him. The final casualty of the Battle of Cowpens is Washington's trumpeter or waiter will draw his pistol and shoot one of Tarleton's troopers coming to assist him. Right before Tarleton leaves the field, he draws his pistol and he shoots William Washington's horse. And after that, Tarleton's gone down the field. The Battle of Cowpens is effectively over. It is a dramatic, major Patriot victory that will eventually lead to Yorktown about 9 months later.
So what you're seeing out here, as Ranger, let me turn the camera back around. There we go. As Ranger Roland mentioned, the time that the battle took is less than it's taken us to walk down this trail and tell you about the battle. This is going to have massive repercussions for the rest of the war, and not only with the loss of men, but you have a huge loss of supplies from the British light forces. Daniel Morgan, with all these prisoners here, roughly 600 British taken prisoner, about 230 more wounded are also going to be captured. 110 British are going to be killed. The American forces lose 24 killed, and some accounts differ about the American wounded. Some say 60, some say 100. But with all those British casualties, Daniel Morgan's army is also going to claim 800 captured muskets. Now, you heard Roland mention the Royal Artillery, how they're going to capture those guns, because what happened to the horses that would have extracted those guns? William Washington encountered them earlier in the battle. Out of the Royal Artillery, the men who are serving those pieces, they go down fighting to the last. The Continentals are swarming over them with bayonets. There's only one survivor. One man who is not a casualty, one man who's just captured, not killed or wounded from those two crews of the Royal Artillery. Trying to think of any nice little fun facts, fun little stories about the battle as we're wrapping up. The supply train. So Morgan's cavalry, William Washington, and some mounted militia. The militia that came around the American right at the double envelopment under Major McCall and Major Jolly. About 90 or so men who were may have been serving mounted before, but there was also a call for more volunteers the day before the battle. They're down there. They're taking part in the pursuit of the British fleeing infantry, trying to intercept the British supply wagons a couple miles down the road there. It's being guarded by about 100 British soldiers, a detachment from each regiment, and the Americans capture 35 wagons of supplies, but it's also said that the British destroyed the greater part of their baggage before fleeing on the horses from those wagons. So we don't know how large the supply train was to begin with. But you also have a traveling blacksmith's forge, and one of the more interesting parts here, the American accounts say that they captured 70 slaves who traveled with the British as servants. That is how some of these accounts describe it. The most recent research and scholarship says that's probably not right, that these may have been formerly enslaved men and women who have been able to self-emancipate themselves, escape from American masters, and they have joined the British Army in a hope to serve with them and earn their freedom. Now, of these 70 people, we only know the names of 8. Billy, Bob, Jenny, Jem, Nanny, Primus, Sarah, and Will. Now, the reason we know the names of these 8 men and women is because they were actually issued to American officers, possibly as payment for their service, or they were kind of placed in the custody of these American officers until the Congress decided what to do with them. And thanks to the little notes that were written out by Colonel Andrew Pickens, we know the names of only 8 of those 70. But that's going to be with the British supply train a couple miles down the road there. I'm trying to catch up on some of the comments here. Okay. So a great question here, Ranger Roland. I'll toss this one to you first. People who call the Battle of Cowpens a turning point, a major decisive battle. There are many other battles who claim to be turning points. Why do you think this battle deserves the name Turning Point?
This battle here involves the Continental Army. The Battle of Kings Mountain, about 4 months earlier, sets up the Battle of Cowpens. Kings Mountain is a militia against a militia. There is only one British regular there. It is a very important battle. This battle involves the regular British forces, Continentals. So, I mean, it's kind of like a whirlwind of everything. The forces that are destroyed here will hamper Cornwallis down the road in the race into the Dan. So chasing after Nathaniel Greene. They will definitely have. So he will definitely feel their loss at the Battle of Guilford Courthouse. That's why Cowpens is a very important turning point of the Southern campaign of the American Revolution.
So I'm going to go with a little different answer. I'm going to say that the Battle of Cowpens is so significant and deserves a turning point title because this secures the Western Carolinas for the Patriot militias. For example, Ranger Roland mentioned Kings Mountain. Prior to Kings Mountain, you would not be able to have a large embodied force in some of these districts down here because of the strong Loyalist and British presence. Kings Mountain removed a lot of that Loyalist presence, made possible the Patriot presence. And then with the Battle of Cowpens here, it allows that Patriot presence to endure. Later on, you're going to see in the rest of 1781, the Loyalist the role, loyalist participation, is going to be limited to very small areas of the backcountry, mostly around British strongholds, British outposts. So if it hadn't been for Cowpens, you may have still have a much larger loyalist insurgent problem for the American government. But then also you have the loss of the light troops of the British Army. This is going to be where Cornwallis makes that decision to burn his baggage, to take off on the race to the dam through North Carolina, that is going to so deplete and wear down his army that he really takes away his other options. He has to get resupplied later on. He's going to have to go to Virginia, to the coast. This really changes his mind about how to wage war in the South with the loss of Tarleton and the light troops here. Anything else?
I got one more aspect I would like to throw out there. If you read the papers of General Lord Charles Cornwallis, about January 5th, Tarleton sends a correspondence to Cornwallis that he's going to get on Morgan's trail. He also kind of puts in that correspondence where Cornwallis is still in Winnsboro on the eastern side of the Broad River. If he can get his portion of the army moving, Tarleton's plan is both of them to kind of mirror movements across the Broad River and then trap Morgan around Kings Mountain. It's not until January 16th where Tarleton writes Cornwallis a very short dispatch that he has been cruelly retarded by other waters. So Morgan is in force over here, like on the way to the Broad River. Cornwallis finally tells Tarleton, so by correspondence, that he's going to stop about 30 miles southeast of here at a place called Turkey Creek. Now, Tarleton, of course, doesn't know this. So once this battle is over and Tarleton is riding back down the road and he's being chased by Washington, Tarleton is still convinced that Cornwallis is only maybe 8 to 10 miles east over the Broad River. So the faster I get to him, the faster I can be reinforced. It's not until this battle is over that Tarleton learns that Cornwallis is not even here. So Brigadier General Daniel Morgan knew he was only fighting one part of the British Army here by the scouts that had brought that information in. To Tarleton, Cornwallis is very close by to support me, like if I need it. It's not until the battle's over that he kind of realizes everything. So, and that has an impact also.
So I hope you guys enjoyed this. So the title turning point, we think it's appropriate here. Daniel Morgan calls it a devil of a whipping that he gave Tarleton. And after looking at the battle here, we hope you guys think so too. So thank you guys for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this. Comment with any questions that you have, and we'll answer them as soon as we can. So again, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed.